Hello and welcome. I am your host for the evening, Goblin Kwain, and tonight we are going to look at a very interesting website called Liminal Earth. Now, what Liminal Earth is it's a website where people share their first-hand paranormal experiences, but then they also tag the location on a map. So, not only do we hear the stories, but we also get to see where they took place. So, if you're watching the video, I will play footage of Google Street View while I read the story. And then, in between the stories, I will talk about any relevant local folklore or legend or history that comes up, and also give some of my thoughts and comments. I always find this to be a very cozy series. So, if it sounds good to you, let's get started. Our first story takes place in Ostrava, Czechia, and was submitted by Toms. It's called Faceless Person. For the past 3 days, I've been seeing or meeting this one person when I'm coming back home from work that doesn't seem to have a face of any sort. It seems like you are in a game, and the person is not rendering correctly until you get closer to it. So for the past few days that I keep bumping into this person, I've had so much bad luck. The guy is not tall, nor is there anything special about him except his face. Until I pass him by, and when I get into his close proximity, his face appears out of the blue. He has this weird gaze, and he doesn't seem to blink. This has never happened to me with any person before. I may be tired, or the lights may be playing tricks on me, but it is weird that this keeps happening every day for the past 3 days. Alright, so I just thought that was kind of a strange one. I wanted to look for something regarding a faceless entity in Czech folklore, and I didn't find anything. But you know how there's different faceless entities, like in Japanese folklore we've talked about before, the Nopera bow. But also, this kind of reminded me of a Men in Black encounter, in that it was a human, but they just had this weird look about them, or kind of a weird sense about the encounter. Maybe they just need glasses, who knows? Interesting story. I also couldn't really find anything particularly of spooky interest in Ostrava, so plenty of interesting folklore and spookiness in the Czech Republic, but for now I think we're just going to move on to our next story. And this took place in North Adams, Massachusetts. This was submitted by Mary R. It's called Houghton Mansion Hill. The Houghton Mansion is the spooky crown jewel of the Berkshires. It was built by the original mayor of North Adams, A.C. Houghton, in the 1890s. Members of the Houghton family met an unlucky fate in a horrible car accident, while their chauffeur allegedly took his own life days later in the stables, and AC died in the home days after that. There are several local tales of the land underneath, and the general area being a giant hotspot for strangeness. To the right of the building is Pleasant Street, a steep climb into the neighborhoods behind downtown. Underneath the first 100 feet or so of the incline, serving as a retaining wall for the side yard of the Houghton Mansion property, sits literal tons of granite taken from the Hoosac Tunnel. The Hoosac Tunnel is often referred to as the Bloody Pit, in reference to all of the horrible deaths that took place during its construction. Local stories circulate from time to time about strange things happening to people's cars and electronics when driving up that hill. I've had phone calls drop, radio signals cut out entirely, as well as go completely haywire, and very brief ringing ears. I've had a fully charged phone freeze up and die, as if it was depleted of battery. Other stories tell of check engine lights coming on, only to go away once they drive onto another road. Okay, so for this one, we are getting into a little local legend and fact. I love a good old haunted mansion, so I definitely was interested and wanted to check this one out. It also just has that American local haunted place flavor to it that I adore. And I could see this as being one of those places that teenagers take a late night drive past just to have a little spooky fun. So first, let's talk about the house, the Houghton Mansion. It's beautiful. It's nestled in a tree-lined neighborhood, besides equally interesting and large houses. It's not a dark, spooky mansion as you may expect. I'm going to call it a Victorian-style house, but I'm not sure if that's right. It appears to be 3 stories with white siding and gray-blue hand-carved trim. It has a massive screened-in porch. Love big porches, especially one that's covered or screened in where you can watch thunderstorms. And it has this interesting kind of octagonal tower that goes up the center, covered in windows. It's just very picturesque. And, of course, if you're watching the video on YouTube, you can see that, but I just wanted to fully describe it in case you're just listening. There's another screened-in porch on the side, and there's all these interesting windows, and then there's this square-shaped brown brick building just jutting out of the back of the house that honestly I thought was kind of ugly. Just kind of weird to see 2 completely different architectural styles slapped together. So, as the story said, the house was built by North Adams, Massachusetts' first mayor, Albert Charles Houghton, in the 1890s. And I guess what I think is the weird square-shaped building in the back is the mansion, the original mansion, which is built in a neoclassical revival style. So maybe I just have no architectural taste. My bad. So I'm going to go over the story of this family. They had the basic information right, but not completely right, so let's go over it. In 1914, A.C. Houghton was in his 70s. He was retired, his health was failing. He had an adult, unmarried daughter who lived with him named Mary, as well as his wife Cordelia. So that spring, the Houghtons bought their first car. Cars were still a pretty new thing at this point. They asked their chauffeur, John, to learn how to drive the car, a Pierce Arrow touring car. And then on August 1st, Mr. Houghton, his daughter Mary, and Mary's childhood friend and her husband went for a leisurely drive to Bennington, Vermont. Mr. Houghton's wife, Cordelia, decided to stay home. Unfortunately, there was an accident as the chauffeur turned the car to go around a team of horses parked on the side of the street, and the vehicle went over the shoulder on the left side of the road and down a steep embankment. It rolled 3 times and stopped upright in a farmer's field, killing Mary Houghton's friend instantly, with Mary dying a few hours later in hospital. A.C. Houghton died 10 days later, allegedly of a broken heart at the death of his daughter. And the chauffeur, John, then took his life the following day, overcome with the guilt he had, thinking he was to blame for the terrible tragedy. He did shoot himself on the property in, I believe, a barn behind the house. So in 1926, the house was sold by the Houghton family. One of A.C. Houghton's surviving adult daughters lived in the house for a little bit with her family, and then they sold it to the Freemasons. And I believe the Freemasons, built the Victorian-ish, or whatever, style house in the front, where there used to be a formal garden. In the early 2000s, paranormal investigations and tours were frequently held at the mansion, as it was said to be haunted by the former owner. And it was frequented both by local teams and big names like TV shows Ghost Hunters and Ghost Adventures. However, all that came to a close in 2017 when the property was sold to a developer after the Freemasons were unable to afford keeping the building up to code, and the developer closed the building to the public. It's clear that the tours and investigations and community access to the building is sorely missed by paranormal teams and enthusiasts, as there are Facebook pages, Reddit posts, and reviews on the property that are just full of comments from people expressing fond memories of visiting the mansion and hopes that one day they will be able to return. So I couldn't find any other references to the strangeness that the OP of our Liminal Earth story mentioned being in that area of the issues with cars and electronics. So we'll just have to take their word for it. I'm not sure if all that has to do with the supposed hauntings, if there's something, like they said, to do with the land, the granite maybe taken from the Hoosac tunnel construction, which is something they mentioned, the Hoosac tunnel. And I'm not going to go into detail about it, but it is an active train tunnel that's over 4 miles long that had so many deaths and injuries during its construction that the workers dubbed the tunnel the Bloody Pit. And indeed, the granite that is under the incline next to the Haunted Mansion was taken from the tunnel, or from the Hoosac Mountain, I should say. So, very interesting local history and local legend. I can see how much this house was beloved by people who went and did investigations there and spent time there. So, hopefully one day people can go back in. But for now, its memory is preserved online and in people's hearts. So next, we are going to be heading over to Croatia. This story was submitted anonymously and took place in 2016. It's called Black Goat. It was a cold morning when I decided to go for a walk. I thought it was going to be a usual walk through the forest. While walking by the river, I constantly heard whistling noises. I followed the river, ignoring these whistles, as it could be hunters. But when the whistles got closer, I decided to go the opposite way, so I don't disturb the hunters. I ended up seeing an abandoned building through the bushes. I didn't want to get close to it, because I didn't want to hurt myself. I decided to turn back and go home, but as I turned around, a very loud whistle was heard. It was coming from that building. I saw a black goat with a half-broken horn. It appeared out of nowhere. I got scared and just started running back home. I have never, ever gone into that forest again. Alright, so I know that was another short, simple one, but I'm always intrigued when a black goat is involved, because they're just so diabolically fun. The imagery of them and their general vibes just invoke all kinds of different superstition, folklore, legend. Also, the location where this story took place is really beautiful, and I think this is the first story I've read from Croatia. But I found the ruins of a 13th century castle when poking around on the map. It's called Herelian Castle, and I couldn't find any legends or ghost stories attached to it, but it is lovely. And there was an abandoned building in the story that we read, so that seemed kind of appropriate as well. So then I wanted to see if I could find any folklore regarding black goats specific to Croatia, and I did come across something that I find very interesting. I will say that, sadly, my resources were extremely limited on this topic, so I only found the sparest information on a couple of websites, but I will share with you what I found, and maybe someone can help me with more information if they're familiar with Croatian folklore. So according to what I found, the Orko, and I'm not sure if that's how you say this or not, what I found is Orko, and this is a fairy horse. Basically, a shape-shifting, mischievous being that presents itself in several forms, one of them being a horse, although it's also seen as a goat, dog, sheep, mouse, or a donkey. A weary nighttime traveler on the road might find themselves suddenly astride this supernatural creature who runs between the traveler's legs and then grows in size so that it puts the traveler on the Orko's back. The Orko then flies into the air through the dark night, depositing the frightened rider in a far-off and possibly unfamiliar location, sometimes stranding them in a tree or bell tower. It's said to be particularly dangerous to come across the Orko close to dawn, as the sound of a rooster's morning crow will cause the Orko to vanish, leaving the person astride it to plummet back down to earth and be killed. So in several ways, the Orko sounds very similar to the puka, which is Ireland's fairy horse, who is also known to vary between the forms of a horse, dog, and goats, and will take travelers on lonely roads on wild rides through the sky, leaving them much farther from home than when they started their journey. However, there are some differences, such as how the Orko is said to come into existence. The Orko is said to be hatched out of chicken droppings that have remained untouched for 7 years, and because of this will often leave a very unpleasant smell and or substance behind once they have vanished. Also, it is possible to control the Orko by using a rosary or a thread of lamb's wool as a rein, and then you can guide the beast across the sky to the destination of your choice, but only until dawn. Now, naturally, some people rationalize that tales of the Orko are merely excuses made by people who got home late, either because they genuinely got lost and didn't want to admit it, or because they purposefully delayed the return home to their family. Maybe they passed out drunk in a farmyard and woke up disoriented and smelling like chicken shit. Who knows? But I do love fairy horses, and I was very excited to find a being similar to the puka in Croatian folklore. Let's read one more story, and this is a fairly long one and has some more interesting folklore that we'll get into afterwards. This one was submitted by Liv. It took place in August of 2022 in Saratoga Springs, New York, and it's called Enormous Floating Head. So first, disclaimer before I start the story. This being that is encountered in the story by Liv, they use the indigenous word for this being, and I have no idea how to pronounce it. I tried looking into it, and I found what I believe was one person kind of trying to spell out the phonetics of it, and then I think I may have found someone saying it. I can't be 100% sure either way. I know that it doesn't sound anything really like how it looks phonetically, so I'm not going to say the word. Instead, I'm going to say flying head, but I will put the word on screen and we'll talk about it after. Anyway, here we go. This was 100% a flying head. For those of you who don't know, flying heads are from Mohawk legends. They are big, floating heads, no bodies. They fly around and chase you down so they can devour you. I grew up in Saratoga. My family has been here for years. My mom and her entire side of the family is Abenaki, so I grew up hearing the stories of our people and the warnings that come with the forest. Granted, we are rather far from where Abenaki threats would be. But we live in Iroquois territory now, and they have their own nightmares to deal with. I've had my run-ins with other bad things in the woods, things such as Wendigo and the Stick Indians, but I have never seen a flying head. I go to the Saratoga Performing Arts Center very often. Not only is it an awesome outdoor concert venue in the summertime, but it is also a very large park where people are welcome to visit and hang out, even when the concert season is off. I find it very peaceful there, and it is a great spot to spend the day. I usually go with a friend of mine, but she was away on a trip this particular week, so I spent time there alone. During the Dead & Co. concerts, slightly less than a kilometer away from the main venue, there is a clearing known as Shakedown Street in the woods. There's nothing too special about this spot. It's mainly for the deadheads to park their buses and vans and do some illegal activities or sell some things like food or art. I sometimes go there since there's lots of cool things to find in that field and in the woods connected to it. I've found lots of crystals, jewelry, wallets, and even shoes in the past. I assume from the deadheads dropping stuff from their stands and forgetting to pick it up before leaving. Occasionally, you can find some arrowheads and old tools from the tribes who lived here long before. Point is, it's a cool spot I like to go to and feel very safe going to. Last time I went to this spot, I was over by Shakedown Street, right where the clearing meets the woods. I heard a horrifying whoosh right over my head. I almost fell over. It startled me so much. I tried to look up and around to see what it was. I figured a crow or some other type of ballsy bird. What I experienced instead was even more horrifying. I noticed that right after that thing swooped by me, everything in the woods went quiet. No birds, no crickets, no frogs, nothing. Everything just went silent. I got this horrible feeling throughout my entire body, telling me someone or something is watching me. After a few seconds of that feeling, I hear several tree branches break, and the sound is getting closer and closer. I figure out which way the sound is coming from, and I begin running. I stayed in the coverage of the trees. I thought it would be a bad idea to go into the open with nothing to hide behind. I ran as fast as I could, changing direction every now and then just for safe measure. I ran and ran. When it started to hurt to breathe, I climbed a tall tree, the tallest near me that I could find. I waited there for what felt like hours. I think I waited so long just out of sheer fear. I didn't know what this was, and I didn't know if it was dangerous. I called my mom, still in the tree, but realized I don't know how to describe where I am. I don't even know where I ran to. My mom told me to climb the tree higher, look for some landmark to try and get to. So I climbed as high as I could. I could see the venue and parts of downtown. I began looking for a place close by that I can dash to and hide in. But just as I turned my head to the other direction, I saw it. The big, decapitated head just floating around, looking for me or some other person to eat. I hugged the tree like there was no tomorrow, crouching down on the branch I stood on, hoping to not be seen by this terrifying creature. I whispered to my mom what I was seeing. "Mom, there's a flying head with no body. It's just floating around." My mom went dead silent. I think she could tell she was freaking me out, because before I could ask what's going on, she said, "Stay exactly where you are. Do not move. Do not look at it. Do not make a sound. Dad and I are coming to you." I began to freak out, because first of all, there's a huge floating head, and second of all, what the fuck am I supposed to do? What if it sees me? I'm horrified. I'm not sure how my dad found me, but I heard him call to me. I was skeptical at first, since by that time, the sun had set and it was getting dark very fast. But it was him, and he had his rifle and our big dog with him. No flashlight or anything. We had to make our way out of the woods with no lights. My mom was waiting for me in the car, where she hugged me and congratulated me on surviving a flying head. She then told me everything about them, from what others have learned before, and answered my questions. She couldn't answer them all super well, since this beast has never been seen from our tribe, and she is technically learning about it too. But she still knew more than I did. I think from this experience, I've learned that I will always learn about the creatures and beasts that live in the woods for the area I'm in. I have never been so afraid in my life. I have warned people of this horrible creature before, but was met with laughs and jokes. And then I heard about this site. So maybe you all on this site will take my warning seriously. Truly a terrifying experience and a terrifying legendary creature. Our OP pretty much covered the basics about it, but I will read just a little bit, starting with an excerpt from the book Legends of the Iroquois, as told by the Seneca chief Corn Planter. Quotes, "There were many evil spirits and terrible monsters that hid in the mountain caves when the sun shone, but came out to vex and plague the red men when storms swept the earth, or when there was darkness in the forest. Among them was a flying head, which, when it rested upon the ground, was higher than the tallest man. It was covered with a thick coating of hair that shielded it from the stroke of arrows. The face was very dark and angry, filled with great wrinkles and horrid furrows. Long black wings came out of its sides, and when it rushed through the air, mournful sounds assailed the ears of the frightened men and women. On its underside were 2 long, sharp claws, with which it tore its food and attacked its victims. The flying head came oftenest to frighten the women and children. It came at night to the homes of widows and orphans, and beat its angry wings upon the walls of their houses, and uttered fearful cries in an unknown tongue. Then it went away, and in a few days, death followed, and took one of the little family with him." End quote. The website nativelanguages.org says, quote, "Flying heads are undead monsters from the legend of the Iroquois tribes. The flying head appears as a huge disembodied head with fiery eyes and long tangled hair. They fly through the air, pursuing humans to chase and devour. The origins of flying heads vary greatly from story to story. In some tales, a flying head is created from a violent murder scene. The severed head of a victim grows to enormous size, or the head emerges from a mass grave. In others, a human is transformed into a flying head after committing an act of cannibalism. In many stories, the origin of flying heads is not remarked on at all. They are primordial monsters whose nature is to eat humans, but occasionally have other motivations of their own." End quotes. They also link to a similar creature known to Midwestern and Plains tribes as the rolling head, which are much the same, but instead of flying, they roll along the ground. I'm honestly not sure which is creepier. I also looked on the site for stick Indians, which is something our OP mentioned having had run-ins with in the woods. Here's what the website's entry says, quote, "In the traditions of many Salish and other Northwest Indian tribes, stick Indians are malevolent and extremely dangerous forest spirits. Details about stick Indians vary from tribe to tribe. They are described as large, hairy Bigfoot-like creatures by the Salish, and as forest dwarves by the Cayuse and Yakama. In some traditions, stick Indians have powers to paralyze, hypnotize, or cause insanity in hapless humans, while in others, they merely lead people astray by making eerie sounds of whistling or laughter in the woods at night. In some stories, stick Indians may eat people who fall prey to them, kidnap children, or molest women. They also take aggressive revenge against people who injure or disrespect them, no matter how unintentionally. Not too many traditional legends regarding stick Indians have been recorded, in part due to taboos relating to these deadly creatures. Stick Indians is an English euphemism. Saying the actual Salish names of these beings in public is considered to be provoking their attacks in some tribes, a belief many native people still adhere to today, choosing to refer to them only in English, if at all." End quotes. And I know that is often the case with supernatural beings in Native American culture, especially the dangerous ones, that they generally aren't spoken about. So I do always try and use information from seemingly native-authored sources. I will say there is a very interesting podcast called Lodge Tales that is specifically focused on Native Americans sharing their stories of the supernatural, such as spirits, Bigfoot, and little people. So I highly recommend checking out that show. I myself find the indigenous cultural perspective on this topic to be fascinating and really refreshing from the mainstream non-indigenous American outlook on the other world. And with that, I think we are going to come to a close for the evening. I hope you enjoyed those stories and the folklore, and if you're watching the video, the beautiful locations in which the stories took place. I try and get a variety of different locations if I can. If you like this format, I do have about a dozen others at this point, reading stories from Liminal Earth and on the videos, showing the locations and the like, so you can find all of those compiled on my playlist I've made for them on YouTube. So I will be back very soon with more stories. Thank you so much for joining me tonight, and until next time, take care and good night.